Welcome to Beyond Business Barriers, powered by insights, driven by strategy, and yes, assisted by AI. I'm your host, Roy MacEwen, and today's episode is part of a special series where we sit down with industry leaders to dig into what's working, what's not, and what the future holds. I'm excited today to have LaVonna here with me on Beyond Business Barriers. LaVonna, why don't you start things off by introducing yourself to our listeners?
Well, hey everybody, LaVonna here. And yeah, so I have been on a roller coaster, which I feel like when you own a business, that's exactly what happens. And so I have like pivoted, I've changed, I've done all the things, but currently I own a company called Ignite Your Shine. And Shine is an acronym that is a framework. And so I take people through the framework so that they can develop themselves as leaders, where they're leading with strengths and that they have the ability and the confidence to not only be leading from the way that they lead from within, but also to do that with presence. And so we work a lot with women in leadership, and that's where we are right now, which is fun.
Absolutely. Sounds exciting. So let's dive right in. We'll kick things off by hearing about your journey and the shifts you're noticing in your industry. After that, we're going to look at the biggest hurdles you're facing right now and what you're aiming to achieve. And we'll close off by looking ahead to see what's on your horizon. All right. Let's keep our listeners on the edge of their seats for the next 30 minutes. Are you ready, Levon?
Well, I'd say I was born ready, but I wasn't. So I'm ready.
All right. Can you tell us a bit about your role at the company and how it fits into the bigger picture?
Yes, I think that's the challenge of entrepreneurship. It's one of the barriers is you get pulled into the business, but you're trying to work on the business. And I think it's important to do both, to keep your hand in one but also having that trust and allowing people to step in and having those that can step in order to grow the business and make it where you want it to be as the visionary. So I would love to say that, I have a schedule of what exactly I do, but I don't because I am a speaker. So a lot of times I'm on the road and that shakes up an entire day, especially if there's delays, but it's an interesting path. And then other days I'm doing strategy. And other days I'm out doing walk and talks. It's one of the things that I have learned, and it came from the waste, looking at what's happening when you have all these meetings. You're like, hey, let's meet for breakfast, let's meet for lunch. And so now I offer walk and talks, which is if they're local, we like we meet somewhere, typically at a coffee shop, and we do our walk and talks.
So I know you're all over the place and you have to be, as an entrepreneur, you have to be busy and going. But if you were to have a typical day, if you had a typical day, if such a thing exists, what would it look like to you?
Okay, we'll pretend. So I tend to have coffee in the morning because I love that time. Sometimes I live in a city, so sometimes I walk to a coffee shop. Sometimes I make my own. But from there, it's getting my workout in. It is the first thing when I look at my calendar is what can I not move? And then the second thing that goes on is my workout. And that could be a walk outside in nature through the city, down by the water, because I do live in Florida. Or it could be where I go to a gym. There's a gym I belong to that I love. And so I try to fit that in as my secondary. And then from there, we tend to do client calls and have a chance to connect with, is this the right fit? If you're looking at changing leadership or creating what we call a human focused culture, then what does that look like for you? What are your goals and dreams? If we waved a magic wand, what would the result be? And so because of that, we have the conversation around, does this make sense with what you want? And is this where you want to be? And if we're a right fit, for both sides. And so that happens to be that. I am doing more and more podcast interviews, which I love. So I thank you so much for having me on. But I just want to share the message and create the impact. And that's the other part that we're working on. And I would say, especially on a typical day, is I'm always thinking, like, how do we give back to our own community? And we are doing more and more of that. So, as a matter of fact, tonight we are going to an event that will be nonprofits will pitch, and everyone who is showing up pitches in some money. And at the end of the night, one will walk away with the pot of money, one of those three nonprofits. And so I am actually speaking tonight for about 5 minutes. And what they don't know is we have started the Firefly Effect Award, which ties into our whole branding and our logo and everything and the meaning behind the research of fireflies. And so with that, the award is going to somebody tonight that is going to be in the audience and she has no idea it's happening. And she will be our first honoree. So it's like that mixture, it's that fun of I have zero time to get bored. So that's the best part of it though too.
What's Give me a little more on Firefly.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I had heard that fireflies research was done that a gentleman, Professor Hugh Smith, had actually thought that he saw a tree struck by lightning, but it wasn't. It was as he got closer and he saw it happen again, he realized the trees were full of fireflies. And he ended up doing some research, and there were some points that when I heard this, I went, oh my goodness, this is what shine. This is the heart of shine. And so a firefly, for example, when it lights up on its own, it actually has a 3% chance of survival. That's it, three. But when they synchronize their lights together, they have an 82% chance of survival. So they go from a 3% to an 82% just by synchronizing. Well, with Shine, we really look at what are the strengths, gifts, skills, and talents. In other words, what you're good at doing. We look at you, what you bring to the table with that, because it's unreasonable to think that we're going to be great at everything. But we often compare ourselves to others. But no, we actually have our own greatness, and that's what Gallup research even proves. So what we've noticed is that okay, well, this is like you bring your own individual shine. It is so important what you bring to the table, and you contribute to a team or to a culture, to a family, a company. You fill in that blank. However, if we can align and we get everyone synchronizing, that's when you see it's unstoppable at that point. There's the growth as you create a place where people want to be. And so that tapped in for me. But then I also heard that when fireflies light up together, they can actually be seen from miles and it attracts more fireflies. And I thought, that's just like us when we shine. When we shine, we encourage others to shine, we invite them to shine. And that's the goal. And so from that, I went, it's like the Firefly Effect. And that's when I went, this is our term. It is the Firefly Effect. So tonight is the woman who is going to be getting it. She actually is someone who in our community emanates and bleeds and leads and all the things that exactly what we would imagine a firefly does when we think about the Firefly Effect.
That sounded to me like not an aha moment, but an epiphany moment. And how long ago did that occur?
That's been in the past year.
Yeah,
Yeah, we changed the
and I
logo
can
about a
still
year ago.
see the effect it still has on you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. I mean, if you could put that into humanity, that basis, simplicity. I mean, that would be amazing.
I love that. Let's do it. That's exactly the goal. And and
We'll
our
we'll
number one core
spread
value.
that. We'll spread that. I'll be the big firefly. I'll look for my sync. Actually, my wife is she's in sync with me because we're the only two people that understand each other. So we'll start out with two. We've been trying to bring more people in, but it's just not happening. But we're trying hard.
Hey, that's what matters, right? And
That's right.
what is it? Yoda says there is no try, just do, or something like
Just
that.
do.
So
Yeah, just do.
I believe in you, and I appreciate that. We will. Yes, that's the Firefly Effect.
Oh,
As
it's
you
been,
starting.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, 30 years for us. So, I mean, there's no turning back now.
yeah, that is a huge milestone, especially this day and age. So
Yeah,
congratulations
especially
to you
at
both.
my age of 40. Um,
Exactly, Roy. That was my guess.
so, well, let's shift gears a bit here, LaVonna. What major changes or trends are you seeing in the industry right now?
Yeah, so it goes back to what you said, humanity. We're seeing there's a challenge with how what we're seeing at the effects of, especially I'll say in the United States. We're all over the place and a lot of political changes are happening. But a lot of people that I have talked with and seen and heard from, it goes back to that humanity. And that is our number one core value is heart for humanity. And so the changes with looking at how do we create this environment and this culture and this place or even our community of who we're surrounded with. And the changes that we're seeing is that there's such a challenge where people are so torn on how do I navigate when it is uncertain waters. But if you go back to the core of what you believe in, so for example, the heart for humanity is our core. And so we let that drive every decision that we make. And we want that to really step into the leadership. So what we want is to see more confidence with people. And I mentioned that before. The other trend that I'm going to mention, because this is really why I started leaning into women in leadership, and we definitely work with leaders in general, but women in leadership was because Forbes had put out an article that showed in some of the worldwide research that there was a backslide in the number of women going into leadership, particularly in certain industries such as tech, information, healthcare, real estate. So when I saw this, I was like, why? And so just being a woman myself, but also having conversations and doing a little bit more research, just finding that the lack of confidence with it. And so if we can learn to not be perfect. It can be the downside to, we expect a lot from ourselves, but also society has expected a lot from us women. And we've taken this on. And because of that, we a lot of times will lean into perfectionism instead of saying, you know what, how do I have presence and how do I mess up and make a mistake, but learn from it and have those conversations. And that's the shift that I'm starting for us to see more and more. And I'm thrilled to see this.
No, that's fantastic. I noticed when I was doing my research to choose individuals to interview, unbeknownst to me, unbiased in any way, shape, or form, I now have one more woman scheduled for podcasts than I do for men. And I currently have 26 scheduled right now. So, I mean, that's proof right there to me that
Yep.
it's there. I hate regression. I absolutely hate regression. You see so much positivity when everybody moves forward, and then the old saying, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back, and I hate to see that. And it's a regression that society has to acknowledge and change that. I
Yep.
mean, uh, that's a whole other discussion. Absolutely. But what I want to do now is I'd like to zoom in a bit and what's working well for your business right now? What's working well for you? Obviously, some things are working well, or we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. I wouldn't be here still. Yes, no, I would say it's definitely word of mouth that has been very helpful and continues to be helpful. It's referrals, it's repeat business. It's I'm proud to say that when I do a speaking engagement, for example, we do the NPS score. So we really look at what the major question, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you what rating would you give this to refer what you just saw or experienced in our case to a friend or a colleague? And we have a 9.61 out of 10 average. So that speaks volumes of what we are doing well. And so when people say, hey, I got your name from a colleague, or we heard about you from someone else, or you saw me speak at a conference, it tells us that we're doing things right. And then the other part too that I have loved is every time we do a debriefing call, we ask the question of what could I or my teammate, what could we have done better to make your life easier, to make this a better process for you? And every single time we've been told nothing. So on one hand, you're like, no, give me something. We could always
You have to.
improve.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But at the same time, that's like, wow,
It's gratifying.
okay, yes, yes. It tells us that we're doing right and that we care about what we're doing. We want to make sure that we make our clients' lives easier. So
Uh,
I embrace that.
oh, absolutely. Now, out of all that, has there been anything that's been frustrating?
How much time do we have, Roy?
We can let it go.
Well, I will say I am frustrating. Um, I am a visionary, so I tend to think things are not moving fast enough ever. People will say to me, even more recently, I had someone say, I cannot believe all that you've accomplished. And I went, oh my gosh, you know what I haven't accomplished yet? Like, I haven't done this, and we're here, and we need to be there, and this is what I want. And you understand, like, when we have people who are sending us emails about how they chose to not commit suicide because of the shine message, or they have a tattoo that says shine because of the message, to two women sitting on a plane who did not know each other, and we have these bracelets that have a ton of meaning to them. And one says to the other, how do you have an Ignite Your Shine bracelet? And she's like, well, how do you have an Ignite Your Shine bracelet? For me, it's still I'm not going to say it's not enough because I'm super grateful for the impact that we've had. But I know that there's so many more. And then what's interesting to me and hard is that Roy, I can't tell you the number of when I do a presentation and a talk that people come up and they say, do you know the military need this? Like, we need this. Do you know the police need this? Do you know our healthcare workers need this? Do you know our athletes need this? And I'm like, yes, 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 and yes. But I know that we have to focus more on one avenue as much as we can, which if other things come in, that's fine because it's the framework is adaptable because if you're human, it works. So but you can't be everywhere at all times and trying to have that message, at least from a business perspective. So I definitely feel like that's one of them. And then I'm often brought in as a keynote speaker, and so there is that inspiration part and definitely takeaways. Like I remember years ago, someone said to me, "LaVonna, are you going to be a motivational speaker or a content speaker?" And I remember
Yes,
thinking, "Why can't I be both?"
that's right.
So I am, right? If you sit
Yes.
during a 45-minute, preferably an hour and a half keynote, because it's interactive, it's experiential, you will not be bored. Um, if I sat down in an hour and a half and there was nothing that you could take away and implement immediately into your life, then don't even pay me. Like, no, it should be both. And so there's a lot who will be inspired to bring in for that, but the investment piece is harder. People are busy, they have other focuses, and one of the things that I had to stop saying, like, it's about building confidence, because even though I talk about it on here, it's ignite your confidence, because confidence affects everything we do. Everything, whether your people take a risk on the job, whether they make a mistake and try to hide it, or do they share it so others learn from it, like it all plays in. And so if we have to think about this as it is an investment. And so if we can create that culture where we do step into this, then we have an opportunity to see it from like beyond. It is not just an inspirational moment, it is that investment part.
Well, I'd go and see you speak. Absolutely.
Thank you. I would welcome you.
So, now, people want to hear business owners, everything else. They always want to hear the key performance indicators, your KPIs. Now, which metrics right now are getting the most attention on Ivana's dashboard?
Well, the NPS, I'm always watching that, just to make sure. I read every comment that comes in. I do look at outliers. It's taken me a long time to do that because one person can say something and I take it very much to heart. And I've done a lot of work there.
That's wearing it
Um,
on your sleeve, but
yep,
that's just the way it is. What did I
yep.
do wrong? Nothing, but they said you did.
Yes, yes, yes. And I know that you can't please everybody. They say like it was it 2% of people automatically don't like you the moment they meet you. And that's for everybody because it's a mannerism you have that reminds them of somebody, or you look like somebody, or your hair, they don't like the way your hair is. Like it's crazy. You're going to, but what I look for are trends. If I have people telling me the same thing multiple times, okay, then maybe I need to pay attention and change that. So I would say the NPS and just our feedback in general. But I'm always looking at our paid engagements. Like we do give back, we do philanthropy work and we give back. But at the same time, I had someone who once said to me that, LaVonna, you need to have money to have a business. So if you don't have money, you don't have a business. If you don't have a business, you don't make an impact. Not at the level that we could and we want. And that has always stuck with me. And so I'm watching, like, looking at our paid engagements, how often are we doing them? And are those numbers staying the same or hopefully actually increasing? And so I do some virtual, but I prefer the in person by far. And then we look at long term partnership, as can we improve not only inspiration, which, when I do a lot of conferences, I get it. I get it's the keynote speaker part and that stops. And I love doing those. But beyond that, those that could have a long term partnership, that's another piece that we measure.
Okay, let's look ahead. I know you're a visionary and you want to do as much, if not more, than your mind and body allow. But where would you love to see the business in 6 to 12 months from now? Let's try 6 and then 12.
Okay. So I'm laughing because my time frame is always off. Like the team jokes, they're like, "Yeah, so Ivana has this idea, and when you ask her when did you want it done, she will tell you basically yesterday, even though you didn't know about the idea, right? Because again, I'm also a quick start, if anyone is familiar with that terminology. So I do have to watch, how I lead the team too. Um, but yeah, I'd say months from now, I would love to be doing more speaking engagements that are bigger, that make an impact, have greater reach with leaders, especially women in leadership. One of the things that we love to do and that is at my heart is to do a keynote speaking event, for example, but then I want that to lead into a women in leadership summit where we spend at minimum a half day to a full day with women. And we've been doing some of that, but I would love to see more of that. So that starts to get into, I'd say, the 12-month mark is really starting to tap into how do we create this whole segue. But at the same time, because I keynote and I've been a keynote speaker for so long, I love working with people, and I'm going to say women in this case, but I love working with people on their presentation skills. And what I do here is very different than what others do. It's not about, how you put your hands. It's not about making sure you stay on the right side of the stage and the left side of the stage, but it's how do you truly connect with your audience in the way that not only you talk, but the way you stand when, oops, sorry, that just scared me. When it pulls
Me
back,
a little bit too, but
my light
no.
fell. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, so like it's how does this look? I just lost my train of thought. Okay, presentation skills. There we are. So what is your presence and how do you really connect with your audience? And so there are things that we do from a nonverbal lens to a way that we tell things that really takes away from what we are trying to accomplish. And so that would be in the 12-month mark, doing not only the keynotes, being more of them, but also women in leadership summits, and then women in leadership summits, and also leading that into how do we really hone in on your presentation skills so that whether you are one-to-one in an interview all the way to possibly even if you're on the stage or you're in front of the board.
Oh, question. When you're on the stage, how do you know that you're making the connection with an individual? What do you look for in a reaction to them? I know myself, since I started doing the podcasting, I
Yeah.
am an eye contact person.
Yes.
And my eyes have just started. I've had issues with my eyes in about the last 10 years. I never wore glasses before. So I always look for eye contact. What do you look for?
I do look for eye contact, but I also look for body language. So body language, for example, I do tell some very personal stories, and so I can see people starting to tear up because they're making a connection. But I'm also watching that so that I know when to pull back. Right? Because do I need to put in an emotional release, for example, in that case? Or is it where I'm going to pull back on some details before I come back in, possibly for a little bit deeper connection? Because I know that's when the powerful moments are. So body language is part of it, but I've also learned it can be deceiving. I love a story. A friend of mine, he's also a speaker, and he shared one time, he said, LaVonna, he said, I was in front of an audience, and this guy, it was for 2 days, this guy was sitting in the very front row. And he was like, seriously? And this speaker, he's funny. And he said, this guy did not laugh once, not one time the first day. And he's like, so I made it my mission on day 2, he will laugh. Like this is going to happen. He said, day 2 rolls around, the guy still doesn't laugh. And he's thinking, everybody else is cracking up. How do you not find this funny? So afterwards, he's talking to a few people, and this guy comes up to him and he said to him, Danny, I just have to tell you, you are one of the funniest speakers I've ever heard in my life. Wait, what? Like, so that fascinates me because it's just like you think you're not connecting sometimes. And some people really do put up a barrier or a wall to not let you know, or they're giggling on the inside, but not on the outside. But you're right. Like, I'm looking for that connection. I'm looking for, are they on their phone? Although, with that said, nowadays, phone can also be taking notes. And so, but I'm watching like when we do activities or having them, like I do some sign language, for example, because my degree was teaching the deaf. So I incorporate that in because also from a neuroscience lens, I know that you're more likely to remember things by adding this in. And if they are involved with the sign language, or when I say, for example, want you to show me self again, well, how did we sign that? And they do it, they're with me, they're there. And so I think it's interesting because even when they turn to say something to somebody, sometimes you're like, oh, they're bored. Oh, they're saying how much they hate this. No, a lot of times they're not, So
I relate to that. Do you believe this? Isn't that amazing? That's what I always tell myself when someone turns their head.
yes. I love
Wow.
that. Yes, and that's what we
Yeah.
should be saying because otherwise we get
Whether it's true or
distracted.
not, it doesn't matter. It just makes me feel good. So I can emit more positivity to them.
Yes. Yes. I
So
love that.
now at the beginning, you touched on this. Now, uh, I want you to fill me in on a recent decision you or your team had made and that you'd handle it differently if you had a do-over today, and what did you learn from it?
We've had to pivot quite a bit, which I know a lot of people have. But I'm actually going to say I've listened to a lot of people I should not have listened to. So like I've been given advice along the way that you should do this or you should do that. So if one, for example, was you should name your company LaVonna. And they said because your name is so unique, it's like Oprah, it's like Ellen. So it's just we know there's LaVonna, there's you and that's it. So I changed the name to LaVonna Inc. And I knew in my gut of guts, I did not want that to be the name because it is not actually about me. It is about Shine. It is about the person who we are serving. And so the moment that I made it about me, I felt there's this whole like, this is not who I am. But I thought, okay, we stand out. Okay, you know business better than I do. Okay, this, and I had all the reasons. And then I went, I can't remember exactly how long, I'm gonna say 2 years approximately. And I thought, I can't stand this. It is still in my core of core. This does not resonate with me. And for those that name it after them, great. But for me, I knew that I didn't want this to not only be about me, but the second part is I don't want Shine to die with me. Like there's too much of an impact that I want it to continue. And so if the business is really about me and I wrestle and the team wrestles with me even to this day, because I am the face of the company, I understand that. I'm the one that gets up and I do the speaking. But even when I'm introduced, I oftentimes will say, like, they'll say, we have an introduction. I'll say, I actually prefer you don't read it because those who really care have already Googled about me. They already know. And then those that like you think may want to hear it, they're going to learn about me all throughout because I plant little stories. You're very going to quickly, within 5 minutes, going to already be telling me things that you know about me because of little comments that I've made or a fact that I told or a story I shared. So it doesn't need to be this whole introduction. And so I tell them, I'm like, if you really do want to do an introduction, then I ask that you share why are you bringing the Shine message to the table? Why to this organization? Why to this conference? Because that gives them the why and the connection to actually listen. It doesn't need to be about me, and I don't want it to be about me. So that was one that, and to do a name change is not an easy process. So I changed it to LaVonna
No.
Inc. Then I changed it again, and it's actually changed multiple times. And now I really feel I'm like, this is it. Like I'm finally leaning into my beliefs, my system, and how I feel.
Well, I have to say, this has been an awesome conversation, LaVonna. I thank you again for being so candid and thoughtful. And once we wrap this series up, um, I'll be putting together a summary of key insights from all across our guests, and I'll definitely send one your way.
Thank you. I so appreciate you, Roy, and I appreciate all that you're doing here because you're making such a huge impact with every single one of these. And I also appreciate that you're intentional, just thinking about who do you have on the podcast because that's what I see a lot with speakers. Is there's still a lot of male speakers and only male speakers on an entire conference panel instead of having a being aware and having a mixture.
Oh, balance is everything.